Under the Bhartiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023, a criminal conviction requires more than just proof of a prohibited act and a corresponding intent. The code contains a specific 30-section sequence that defines the precise boundaries where the state's authority to punish is suspended. These are the general exceptions of Chapter 3, spanning sections 14 through 44. While these sections cover diverse scenarios, from accidents to self-defense, they are not a collection of isolated loopholes. Chapter 3 functions as a sorting mechanism, evaluating every non-culpable act through one of two specific theoretical channels. The first channel covers excuses. This category applies to individuals who lack the legal capacity or the cognitive state necessary to form a guilty mind. The second channel covers justifications. In these cases, the act and intent are present, but the law authorizes the conduct because it serves a social utility that outweighs the harm. Correctly identifying which branch applies to a specific set of facts is the foundational requirement for navigating criminal liability under the BNS. We begin with the excuses side of the structure, where the law evaluates conditions that prevent a person from forming the intent required for a crime. Section 20 sets a clear age threshold, granting complete immunity to children under 7 years old. For children between 7 and 12, Section 21 makes immunity conditional. It requires an assessment of whether the child had attained sufficient maturity to understand the nature of their conduct. Section 22 applies the unsound mind threshold. To qualify, the person must be incapable of knowing the nature of the act, or that what they are doing is wrong or contrary to law. Intoxication adds another layer of scrutiny. The BNS differentiates between sober and intoxicated minds based on how the intoxication occurred. Under Section 23, protection is granted for involuntary intoxication, where a substance is administered without the person's knowledge or against their will. This protection disappears if the intoxication was voluntary. To prevent using substances to bypass the law, the BNS applies a specific legal standard. Section 24 explicitly states that a person who voluntarily intoxicates themselves will be judged as if they had the same knowledge and intent as a sober person. These incapacity excuses recognize that if a person cannot legally form a guilty mind, the first prerequisite for a crime is missing. The next node within the excuses branch deals with actions resulting from flawed perception of facts. Section 14 outlines mistake of fact. It protects individuals who perform an act believing, in good faith, they are legally bound to do so. Section 17 provides similar protection for those who believe they are justified by law. In both cases, a factual error regarding the situation can serve as a shield. However, the Sanhita maintains a strict limit. The mistake must be a fact, not of law. Ignorance of the legal code itself provides no immunity. Every valid mistake exception is bridged by the requirement of good faith. These sections protect well-intentioned actions that are based on a careful, though ultimately incorrect, assessment of the surrounding facts. Moving to the justifications branch, we look at instances where the actor understands their actions and the resulting harm, but the state authorizes the conduct. Section 26 addresses harm caused by consent. It authorizes acts done in good faith for a person's benefit, provided that person has consented to the risk of that harm. The Sanhita illustrates this with a surgeon. If they perform a dangerous operation on a patient, the patient's consent and surgeon's good faith intention remove the act from criminal liability. This justification has a fixed limit. Consent can never legally authorize the intentional causing of death. Section 28 further clarifies that consent is void if given under fear of injury or misconception of fact, provided the actor is aware. Beyond consent, Section 19 defines necessity. This applies when harm is caused without criminal intent to prevent a significantly greater harm. This requires a literal weighing of outcomes, where the law expects a person to choose the course of action that results in the lesser evil. These justifications are built on social utility. Technical violations are permitted only when necessary to prevent a tragedy or serve a vital purpose. Finally, we reach the most scrutinized justification in the code, the right of private defense. Sections 34 and 35 establish that this right covers the protection of one's own body, the body of any other person, and property. The critical question for this node is identifying the statutory threshold where the right to defend oneself escalates to the authorized use of lethal force. Section 38 specifies the types of physical assault, such as those threatening death or grievous hurt, that justify causing death. Section 41 provides a corresponding list for property crimes, including robbery and arson. The law imposes strict time limits. Under Sections 40 and 43, the right commences the moment there is reasonable apprehension of danger and continues only as long as that apprehension remains. Once the danger passes, any further force is a criminal act. The Sanhita frames private defense as a mechanism for immediate survival, not as a license for subsequent retaliation. When we step back, the individual sections of Chapter 3 form a complete system. Navigating criminal liability requires placing the facts of a case into the correct node of this excuse or justification structure. Throughout this entire system, one specific requirement appears repeatedly across both branches. That requirement is good faith. The BNS defines this as an act done with due care and attention. This forces an objective standard of reasonableness on the actor, even in emergency situations. While the BNS 2023 carries forward long-standing legal principles, it demands a mastery of this organizational structure to determine the true limits of what the law considers a crime.